next few minutes, I'll take you on a tour of this locomotive to acquaint you with the similarities and differences between the SD70 Mac and the traditional locomotives you're presently operating and maintaining. But before we get started, let's review some of the specifications. The SD70 Mac weighs in at 415,000 pounds. It's 74 feet long, and the height of the top of the rail to the top of the cooling fans is 15 feet 9 and 5/8 inches. These dimensions make the SD70 Mac one of the largest locomotives in use in North America today. Now, because of its size, many of the capacities of the SD70 Mac are greater than other locomotives in the BN fleet. For example, the fuel capacity is 4,900 gallons, approximately a 25% increase over the SD40-2. This unit carries 436 gallons of lube oil and 72 cubic feet of sand, both significant increases.
Now that you've taken a look at the outside of the locomotive, it's time for a tour of the inside. Let's go to the cab. As you pass through the nose, you find the cabinet for fusees and torpedoes over here on the right. Over on the left, we've got an area for tools over here. As you pass through more of the nose, you find over here the next cabinet's normally locked. That houses the major computer components for the integrated cab electronics, or ICE system. Over here, you've got your toilet and your refrigerator. The SD70 Mac has been built with a North American cab, or modified cab. That's where the M in Mac comes from. AC, of course, refers to the alternating current used in the traction motors. Before we go much farther, let's take a look at one of the biggest safety differences on board the SD70 Mac. It's possible for very high voltage to be found in several locations on this locomotive, even when the diesel engine is not running. Fatal electrical energy may be found in the high voltage system in areas such as inverters, DCL switchgear, main alternator, traction motors, and other components. Some of these are located in the high voltage cabinet. For those of you involved in maintaining the SD70 Mac, additional training will be provided on the safety procedures involved with the proper discharge of the high voltage unit. And again, remember, extremely high energy may be present even on a dead SD70 Mac locomotive. That's a significant change from traditional units. So unless you've been properly trained, stay out of this cabinet. By the way, the isolation switch and the emergency stop switch are found here on the back wall of the cabinet, as they are on most locomotives. SD70 Mac locomotives do not have extended range dynamic brake contactors. Most power contactors have been eliminated, as well as motor, braking switchgear, and reversing switchgear. In the place of these components, EMD has used a DC link switch gear to connect the inverters to the power circuits. As I mentioned earlier, these components may contain extremely high voltages even when the locomotive is not running. You must exercise extreme caution in working with these components and use the proper grounding procedures. You'll receive training on proper discharge procedures in other programs. There are a number of other interesting features inside the cab. One dramatic change for many of you might be the console-style control stand. And one thing you might notice first off, the lack of gauges. All the information you're used to using to operate locomotives, and a lot more, is located right here on the ICE screens. The control stand looks different, but the information is essentially the same. ICE stands for Integrated Cab Electronics. This system displays all the needed information about air brakes, throttle position, and tractive effort. Indicators such as PCS open, sand, wheel slips, and end-of-train telemetry. The ICE screens can also be used to review fault and other data from mechanical and electrical troubleshooting. CSX brake controllers will be the same as on other AC locomotives. The automatic and independent brake controllers have actuating buttons on the sides of the handles where the brakes can be actuated or bailed off. The independent brake handle is black. The automatic handle is red. Below the air brake handles is the gold alert or reset button. The throttle dynamic brake handle is mounted near the center of the console to the right of the reverser, and near the center of the console are the manual, sand, and lead truck sand switches. The bell and horn switches are here. The slow speed or pace center controls is mounted near the center of the console to the work surface. Located to the left, you'll find your radio headset, and on this surface, most of the rest of your controls. Front and rear headlights, display select, engine run switch, generator field switch, control fuel pump switch, dynamic control switch, console light control, step light switch, attendant call button, and the light dimmer rheostat. Overhead on this console, you'll find still more features. You'll find the alerter, reading light dimmer switch, heater and air conditioner control, short hood light breaker, radio, and MU engine stop. As we move to the left side of the cab, you'll notice there's much more floor space than in a conventional locomotive, and that the seats are taller, they're more comfortable, they provide excellent visibility. The conductor's console is also set up much like a desk. It has separate reading lamps, radio, speed indicator, horn button, and emergency brake valve. There's also a computer screen on the conductor's side that indicates major locomotive functions. Well, now that you've seen the inside, it's time to go back outside and open a few doors under the long hood.
Another of the significant differences between the SD70 Mac and traditional locomotives are the radial trucks. BN is the first railroad company in the U.S. to use this type of truck in freight operations. These trucks utilize 42-inch wheels with 38-inch index grooves, and the wheels are thought of as both articulated and steerable. The trucks balance the weight of the locomotive on 4 corner rubber-mounted pads. This is particularly important in reducing weight shift at adhesion levels above 25%. The first and third axles are mechanically linked through steering linkage. Thus, they're able to rotate a few degrees within the truck while the center axle floats laterally. Overall, this radial truck design helps the truck to change its angle of attack on the rail. The result is reduced flange and rail wear, increased adhesion in curves, and a better ride. Another big change on the SD70 Mac is the AC traction motor. This locomotive is equipped with 6 3-phase squirrel cage AC induction traction motors. Again, this part of the locomotive's electrical system can potentially hold a fatal level of electrical energy, even when the unit is dead. So be sure that the discharge procedures have been followed. The SD70 Mac has more pulling power than conventional DC traction motor equipped locomotives. The AC motors produce higher starting torques for improved performance out of the hole without sacrificing ground speed. Because the AC traction motor uses induction and not commutation, these motors will require very little maintenance. In fact, the AC motor is sealed with no inspection covers, and even the visual inspection of the connections at the terminal box, cabling, and gear case will be only periodic maintenance items. Roller support bearings have replaced the friction style, and the gear cases are oil-filled and sealed. The usual need for brush changing and stoning the commutator is completely eliminated, as traction motor brushes do not exist on the SD70 Mac. This traction motor innovation has several implications for operators as well. First, AC traction motors cannot be plugged. That is, the traction motors cannot be reversed to stop the locomotive. The SD70 Mac is very sensitive to traction motor rotation in the opposite direction of the desired operation. In fact, the locomotive would probably drop its load and the computer would log a fault if the locomotive rolls backwards on a hill with the reverser in forward. Second, short time ratings are virtually eliminated. AC motors do not require the same high currents as needed in the DC motors for low-speed pulling. Consequently, there's far less heat generated at low speeds. Thirdly, stall burns cannot occur. The SD70 Mac does not have the conventional commutator and brushes. And lastly, operators will note that the flux or buildup time on this locomotive is slightly longer than DC units. That is, the time required for magnetism to build in the motors when the reverser is moved from the center to forward or reverse will be longer. Once under power, however, changing throttle or brake positions response times will be normal or perhaps slightly faster than the SD40-2. The same is true for loading times. Loading will be about the same as you're used to or slightly faster. Well, that completes our tour of the new SD70 Mac locomotive. I hope you found this orientation presentation helpful. What you've seen here today is by no means complete. You'll receive much more comprehensive information on the safety features, maintenance, and operations